My name is Lucille, and this isn't a BBQ, it's a performance. A tightrope walk between blood ties and quiet betrayals staged under the soft lies of patio lights. As potato salad passed and camera shutters clicked like applause cues, my sister met my eyes a slow, deliberate smirk. "Time to move out," she said, like a punchline. Everyone laughed. They didn't know the house was mine. But that wasn't the wound, not really. The real cut was older. Years of being the invisible one. Spoken over. Passed by. Treated like a squatter in the very walls I bled to keep upright. Have you ever stood in the house you saved and been told you don't belong in it? That's the flavor no one talks about. Betrayal marinated in family politeness. The grill was already hissing when I pulled up. Same house, same stubborn oak by the fence, only now its limbs bent low as if heavy with memory. It loomed like a witness. From the porch, I could already hear them voices, too loud laughter that carried the sharp edge of performance. It was hot, unkind to skin and secrets alike. But I wore the navy dress, no frills, no distractions, just clean lines and control. Mom used to say I dressed like someone hiding something. Maybe I was. Maybe I just got tired of being seen for the wrong reasons. The backyard hadn't changed, but the people had. The lights Dad strung up for my graduation still hung overhead. Only now they lit up strangers in familiar clothes. I nodded at faces they didn't nod back. I didn't flinch. Bryn stood by the cooler holding a can like it was champagne. Her hair perfect, her laugh weaponized. Her gaze slid over the crowd until it landed on me, or pretended to. Mom's voice cut through the air. "Lucille," she called, wiping her hands on a dish towel bleached past identity. "Grab a plate, mingle a bit, don't lurk." I opened my mouth too late. She'd already turned. Again. Of course. Delphine stood by the fence like she was security detail. She wasn't on payroll anymore, but no one told her that. I was grateful. Someone had to remember where the lines were drawn. I made my way toward the drinks. Eyes flicked. Voices wrapped around each other like ivy. Judging. Bryn's voice rose too casual, too crisp. "So, Lucille," she called, still living the teenage dream. "Or have we finally flown the nest?" Laughter. Polite and sharp. A man, someone from her office, probably looked at me like I was an overdue bill. My hand tightened around the empty cup. I felt the burn rise in my throat, but I didn't move. Didn't blink. "I own the dream," I said steady, "and the land it sits on." Her smirk flickered just for a second, then returned, shinier than before. "Sure, Lou. Keep telling yourself that." I didn't answer. I walked on. The name tags sat on a table near the grill. Mine, Lucille Resident Mooch. Someone thought they were clever. Probably Bryn. Probably all of them. Guests chuckled. Bryn shrugged. "It's a joke," she said. "Lighten up." A woman leaned to her husband. "Wait, she still lives here." The whisper wasn't meant to be private. I peeled off the sticker, folded it once, then again, small, neat. I slid it into my pocket. Not to hide it, to remember. Screenshots fade, but silence makes people squirm. I sat alone, far from the folding chairs, far from their orbit. The ribs were dry, the slaw too sweet. Everything reeked of effort without care. A breeze passed, and memory followed. Dad coughing in the living room, me the one heating his soup, cleaning the meds, lifting his weight, while Bryn posted curated grief from 4 states away. They called it duty when I stayed. I called it love. Now they call it dependence. I call it silence they haven't earned. Delphine passed by, handed me a napkin, looked at the name tag in my palm, then at me, raised an eyebrow. Didn't speak. She didn't need to. We speak in another language now, the kind forged in trenches, not dinner tables. I didn't come for ribs. Didn't come for forgiveness. I came with something heavier than comebacks, and it sat quiet and folded in my purse. As the sun dropped and citronella failed its war against Texas bugs, I slipped to the edge of the yard. From there, I saw the whole stage. Children ran barefoot. Grown-ups clinked drinks. Bryn posed for someone's lens, glossy, curated like always. I watched her raise a glass, perform joy. I didn't care. My fingers brushed the envelope. The weight of it wasn't just paper. It was power. It was truth with teeth. It was the reckoning. She still thinks it's her house. I turned from the laughter, walked past the lemonade and plastic smiles, past the garden table and into the shadows. Toward the photo wall, Bryn had curated old memories strung up with lights. A museum of selective truth. Let her shine. Let them smirk. Tonight, they toast illusions. Tomorrow, they read the deed. From a distance, the display looked like warmth, curated, intentional, soft enough to fool strangers. Up close, it felt like evidence. Not nostalgia, but omission, crafted with surgical precision. Bryn stood near the mic, champagne flute in hand. Her posture rehearsed, the dress expensive, and her voice dripping with poise. "Everyone, just a quick moment," she said, tapping her glass with a fork like a conductor summoning an overture. "I wanted to surprise Mom tonight with something meaningful." She stepped aside. An easel stood at the center like a courtroom exhibit. Framed photos arranged with care, each chosen to elicit applause. Bryn and Leo in matching Christmas sweaters with Mom. Bryn embracing Dad on the beach, her glow filtered by sunset. Leo holding his daughter in our backyard, a ribbon of nostalgia knotted around each image. And me, I was nowhere. Not even a cameo in the background. No arm reaching into the frame. No snapshot of the house in the years I drained myself to keep it standing. They didn't forget. That's the cruelty. They remembered and edited. A silence followed. Not shocked silence, not a gasp. Just agreement. Like my absence was a correction, not an oversight. I didn't blink. Didn't fidget. I told myself they chose not to remember. And still the applause came. Polite, empty, a standing ovation for a carefully redacted history. I turned to the buffet, my heels sinking slightly into the grass, a detail no one noticed. A few people stepped aside as if I were someone else's shadow. I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I just stood still, watching a narrative unfold without me in it. Later, someone called out, "Time for cake." The lights shifted like a scene change. Bryn returned with a pristine white sheet cake, its edges dusted with flowers, and 5 words scripted in pale pink. "To the children who keep this family strong." I scanned the frosting. Bryn, Leo, Grace. No Lucille. Not even a corner crumb of acknowledgement. Just another omission chalked up to space. We didn't want to crowd it. Bryn offered quickly, her eyes flicking toward me. "You know how bakeries limit characters." Delphine stood at the edge of the patio. One eyebrow lifted sharp knowing, but she said nothing. She never needed to. I gave her a small smile. Not gratitude, recognition. We'd both heard this punchline before. Inside the house still smelled like lemon cleaner and old upholstery. I drifted through the living room like a ghost returning to its burial ground. In the kitchen, near the fridge, I found a crooked magnetic frame at the bottom corner holding a child's drawing. Stick figures, a lopsided sun, and my name once bold in purple marker, now a faint blur. Almost gone. Too intense. Too serious. Too dramatic. That's what they always said. I used to believe them. I don't anymore. I slipped my phone into airplane mode. Not as protest, just realism. No one was going to text me anyway. Outside, the party had moved on. Cake was being served, jokes floated over wine, and I drifted through the crowd like fog barely noticed unless I got in someone's light. I paused near the fire pit, close enough to overhear a man ask, "So is Lucille still in between jobs?" Bryn smiled. Not correction, not defense, just a pleasant nod, as if my silence over the years had licensed their narrative. In between jobs. That's what they think. While I built a company from nothing, from hunger. A startup worth 7 figures. 3 years of 15-hour days. No press releases, no conferences, no inspirational quotes slapped on social media. I didn't perform success. I lived it, quietly. But to them, I'm still the in-between. A character they never updated. A placeholder in their script. By the cake table, Mom and Bryn laughed as they cut into it together, blades slicing through frosting like they were carving out a legacy. I stood just beyond the patio light watching them. Not bitter, just clear. I've been generous, I thought. I've been silent. I've been edited out. I reached for my purse, never letting it leave my side. My fingers found the envelope. Its weight was different than everything else in the yard, not sugary or sentimental, but precise, legal, final. It wasn't comfort I sought. It was control. Let's see how they react when the truth comes back into the frame. I stepped away from the table. The noise behind me, laughter, plastic cups clinking, sounded like a laugh track in a show I never auditioned for. Perfectly cast, flawlessly staged, and I was never even in the script. I turned and moved quietly back inside the house where ghosts go when they're ready to stop being quiet. Beyond the hum of lukewarm conversation and the brittle politeness of family smiles, the house offered something the yard couldn't silence. Not the hollow kind that follows insult, but a dense waiting quiet, the kind that makes you notice your breath. I walked the hallway, slowly absorbing that stillness like armor, until I reached the office, the room Dad used in his final months. It smelled faintly of menthol and dust, and something else, the unfinished weight of goodbye. My laptop still sat on the desk. I'd left it behind on purpose. Not forgetfulness. Lack of trust. Too many hands in this house touched things they didn't respect. I opened it. The screen bathed the room in a pale glow. Familiar. Cold. I navigated to the email I had read more times than I'd ever admit. Lucy, you stayed. You sacrificed. You gave up more than they'll ever understand. I want you to know this house, this burden, it was never meant to be yours. But you carried it like it was. I can't fix what I let slide, but don't let them erase you. Not again. Love, Dad. I read it again. Not for validation. I knew my worth. But for clarity. His words steadied me. My silence hadn't been weakness, it had been mourning. A deep, bone-soaked grief that made noise feel like betrayal. Outside, the golden hour stretched its fingers over the lawn. The light softened the edges of everything, but not enough to blur the truth. I moved toward the drink table, empty cup in hand, when a small tug at my dress halted me. My niece. Big eyes, honest voice. Why don't they like you? She asked. I knelt. Her innocence stung more than any of Bryn's cheap barbs. Sometimes I said grown-ups don't understand kindness until they lose it. She nodded as if she already knew. That broke something small inside me, not because she asked, but because she understood. I watched her dart back to the yard, back to innocence, while I turned to the garage, a place I hadn't touched all evening. The door groaned open, releasing a waft of musty memories, rust motor oil, the quiet decay of things once useful. I flipped the switch. The bare bulb flickered like an old warning. In the far corner, hidden behind boxes no one had unpacked or cared to label, was the drawer, the one that held my quiet ledger. I opened it. Receipts, invoices, tax letters, inspections. Years of evidence, not of ownership, but of effort, of care. Dad had kept them. Not for them. For me. For the moment, they had dared question what I had done to keep this place breathing. These weren't weapons, not at first. But in a house where silence is twisted into guilt and memory is edited like a press release, care needs sharp edges. From the window, I could still see the children playing. For a moment, I pretended again, barefoot in the grass, fireflies in hand, certain I belonged. But the illusion collapsed quickly. This house wasn't a home anymore. It was a stage, a narrative. They hadn't just redecorated, they had revised. Trimmed me out of the story like a redundant line in a script. This wasn't about real estate. It was about ghosts. About Dad's laughter ricocheting off the kitchen tiles. About Mom humming when she still believed in recipes. About a girl who held a family together while her siblings booked flights to places they couldn't spell. This house was never about bricks, I whispered. It was about memory. And they're burning it. I pulled out my phone, typed slowly. Be ready to move. This ends tonight. My lawyer replied in seconds, standing by. I closed the folder, slipped it into my tote like a final argument, shut the garage behind me. The smell of smoke met me, barbecue sweet and thick, but rotting at the edges like a celebration past its expiration. I walked back toward the yard, unnoticed. Perfect. They wanted quiet. I'll give them a silence they'll never forget. Each step felt heavier, not from anger, from clarity. The dry grass gave slightly under my heels. The string lights flickered above like stage lights waiting for the final act. The scene hadn't changed. Same plastic smiles, same tired conversations. But I had changed. I wasn't background anymore. I was the reckoning. I scanned the crowd, not out of fear. Calculation. Marcy stood by the side table, balancing her plate like a tightrope walker, chatting idly with a cousin who hadn't spoken to me since Dad's funeral. They thought I had vanished. No, I was simply letting them perform. Before I brought down the curtain, she saw me before I spoke, Marcy standing with that practiced elegance, a half-filled plate in one hand and a wine glass balanced like a prop. Her smile was genuine, though soft around the eyes, unguarded. Hey, Lou, she said, voice warm in a way that didn't try too hard. Didn't expect to see you tonight. I wouldn't miss it, I replied. My tone was neutral, almost gentle. Then, just as casually, I slid a thin folder from my tote and handed it to her, like it was a birthday card. You work in real estate, right? She nodded, lifting a brow. Sure do. Why? Take a look. She opened it mid-sip. Her smile didn't falter until the second page. Receipts, inspection letters, contractor quotes. Pest control, foundational reinforcement, plumbing overhauls, all dated, all signed, all paid from one account, mine. A quiet trail of devotion they never credited. I thought Bryn handled this stuff. Marcy murmured, voice dipping just enough to betray her discomfort. I didn't blink. She handled the complaints. I handled the damage. That landed. Marcy looked up, really looked, and something shifted in her eyes. Not pity, recognition. The kind that makes you realize the story you've been fed was edited for comfort. And now it was unraveling. A sharp laugh cut through the yard. Bryn again center stage, wine in hand, charisma dripping like too much perfume. I moved toward her slow and quiet. Not a confrontation, a reveal. Sterling was there now. Dad's old friend, broad shoulders and no patience for facades. He stood beside Bryn, listening as she gestured, voice raised in performance mode. "She thinks she's the backbone of this house," Bryn said, smiling to the group. "But the only thing she's consistent at is living here. Rent-free." Sterling didn't even flinch. His words came low and clean, the kind that make a room go still. "Your dad told me this house was meant for Lucille," he said. "He said she was the only one who stayed, the only one who showed up when it counted." Bryn blinked, just once, then smiled too wide, too bright, cracking at the corners. "Sterling, that's sweet. But Dad said a lot of things when he was on medication. He said it before he got sick." Sterling cut in. Then he turned and walked away, not even looking back. Her smirk wilted. Just a little, enough to see the edges fray. I didn't follow him, didn't thank him. I didn't need to. He remembered what they spent years trying to erase. Now the whispers moved like fog through the yard. Soft at first, cautious, but gaining traction. Two cousins murmured near the dessert table, glancing at Marcy, who still held the folder like it buzzed in her hand. An uncle tilted his head as Sterling passed him. "I didn't fan the flames. I let them breathe." Bryn's laughter thinned. Her voice rose an octave too high. She brought Mom into another story, another deflection. But the eyes watching her weren't glazed in admiration anymore. They were calculating, weighing. Truth once let loose never goes back into hiding. I stood at the base of the porch, fingers brushing the banister. I remembered scraping my knee there when I was 9. Dad had scooped me up like I was weightless, humming something off-key that made the pain feel like a story instead of a wound. Everyone else had panicked, said I was too sensitive. But now I knew I wasn't fragile. I was the one who noticed the cracks before the roof collapsed. Dad once told me after a particularly cruel week, "You are not the problem, Lucy. You're just the only one who won't pretend the roof isn't leaking." And now, for the first time, I wasn't the only one who saw the water. Bryn materialized at my side. Her voice was tight, like a thread pulled too far. "Are you seriously trying to ruin this night?" I turned toward her slowly. Measured. Steady. "I'm not trying," I said. "I'm succeeding. By telling the truth." She inhaled like she might fire something venomous, but stopped. No snark, no defense, just retreat. Her heels caught slightly in the soil as she stepped back, a tiny stumble, almost imperceptible. But I felt it. She was unraveling. I walked back toward the folding tables. The air had changed. The glances in my direction were different now, not pity, not avoidance. Curiosity, respect. People were recalibrating. I picked up a cup of lemonade just to keep my hands busy, eyes locked on Bryn across the lawn, like a chess player watching a piece about to fall. The sun dropped lower, dragging long shadows across brittle grass. I stepped toward the edge of the house where memory and wind hit softer. That's when I saw her. Delphine. Moving with purpose. She rounded the corner, slow but steady. Her eyes met mine. No performance, just clarity. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope, one she hadn't planned to share, but she had decided. Now she was ready to speak. "She told me to keep this," Delphine said, voice low and shaken. "He said it was for you, for when you'd need it." Her eyes didn't ask for permission. They simply handed me the past, like a verdict long overdue. I unfolded the envelope slowly. Inside, a scanned copy of an old deed draft, unsigned, but clear. Attached to it, a notarized letter from Dad, dated 6 months before his body failed him, but well after his clarity had returned. Lucille is to inherit the house, it read. She's the one who stayed. She's the one who kept it standing. Delphine didn't linger. She looked at me with something that wasn't quite sympathy, more like a baton being passed in a race she had run just far enough. Then she disappeared quiet as smoke, as if she had never been there at all. I folded the papers and tucked them into the inner pocket of my purse with the rest of the records. But this time, the weight felt different. Not burden, ballast. I wasn't sinking anymore. I was steadying. At the drink station, I heard Mom laughing with the neighbor, the kind of laugh that tried too hard to smooth old fault lines. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but some words don't wait for permission. Well, Mom chuckled. Technically, the house is in Lucille's name, but Bryn likes to act like it's hers. A quiet chuckle from the neighbor, the kind that lives halfway between surprise and discomfort. I didn't turn, but I saw Bryn freeze near the appetizer table glass midair. She pivoted quickly, too quickly, cutting in like a blade. "That's not what she meant," Bryn said. Her voice was light, but it cracked at the edges. "It's just a figure of speech." Mom blinked. The neighbor nodded slowly, as if recalibrating her drink in her hand, deciding whether she wanted more or was already queasy. I walked toward a group of cousins gathered near the grill. Their chatter thinned when I arrived. I didn't take it personally. I'd stopped doing that a long time ago. "You know, I said my tone casual. I had the HVAC system replaced last fall. Cost me a fortune, but it was overdue." A cousin raised his brow. "I thought Bryn handled all that." I shrugged. She handled the menu. I handled the mold. A few quiet laughs. "No venom, just air being cleared." "Roof too?" someone asked. "Yeah. New beams, inspections, all cleared." They listened. Really listened. And when one cousin said, "I never knew," I answered honestly, "No one ever asked." Across the yard, Bryn's voice lifted suddenly like a flare in the night. She raised her glass, the stem trembling slightly. "Let's all raise a glass to Mom for holding this family together through everything." There was clapping, less than before. I caught someone glance toward me mid-toast. Another fidgeted with their phone. Even Mom looked uncertain, caught in the pause between pride and pretense. Bryn kept speaking, layering her voice with syrup. But the audience had shifted. They weren't celebrating. They were calculating. I walked past the grill toward the porch steps. That's when she came again, cornering me like a storm, desperate for one last strike. "You keep pushing," she hissed, her voice a whisper shaped like a threat. "And this will get ugly." I turned slowly. Calm. Precise. "You should have thought of that before underestimating me." She stared at me like she didn't recognize my face. And maybe she didn't. Maybe for the first time, she was seeing the version of me that didn't flinch, didn't bend, didn't vanish under pressure. That was the last warning I would give her. Everything that followed moved like honey through glass. Thick. Intentional. Weighted with inevitability. The porch lights flicked on, casting the yard in a soft amber glow. It felt staged, like someone had cued a scene change. But this wasn't a script. This wasn't theater. I wasn't playing a part. I was rewriting the ending. I walked slowly past the string lights and the remains of half-eaten hors d'oeuvres. A few of Bryn's firm colleagues stood by the drink table, faces carefully neutral. But when our eyes met, they looked away, suddenly very interested in their glasses, their cuffs, the invisible lint on their sleeves. I didn't smile. I wasn't here to ease discomfort. I was here to let the truth stand on its own feet. That's when it happened. A voice, muffled at first, then clearer, metallic, and fractured like a phone speaker caught between dimensions. Heads turned. Conversations shattered mid-sentence. The sound came from the wine table, more specifically from Bryn's purse, left open as if nothing inside could hurt her. But it did. Corbin's voice. Cold. Calculated. Recorded. Just get her out. Then the place is ours. You'll get your share once the deal closes. The words cracked the air like glass under pressure. Forks froze. Cups lowered. Gasps rode the silence like lightning. Across the yard, I saw her. Bryn. Her face drained to a shade paler than the Chardonnay in her trembling hand. She lunged for her purse like it still had secrets left to protect. Fingers trembling, breath ragged, she clawed at the phone, trying to silence the voice that had already branded her. But the damage had unfurled like smoke, thick, irreversible, and now hanging in the air between every guest, every plate, every sip of wine. The words had landed, and they weren't going anywhere. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the silence stretch wide and suffocating. Let the betrayal throb in the space where small talk had once lived. Let them all feel what I had been forced to carry quietly, invisibly for years. When Bryn finally turned to face me, her expression was flushed and frantic lips parted like she could somehow will time to bend backward. I didn't blink. You wanted me out, I said, voice even deliberate. I want you exposed. Her mouth moved, but the words never made it out. What could she say? Lies only work when truth is still under the table? And mine was rising fast. I turned and walked to Leo. He hadn't moved in minutes. He stood near the grill like a statue, paper plate in hand, untouched. His posture was stiff, like he could sense everything around him cracking. I handed him a folder. Here's the loan, I said. She used the house as collateral, without my consent, without telling anyone. He took it with the hesitance of someone accepting a live grenade. Page by page, his expression twisted, the bank header, the inflated amounts, the forged signature. The lie now traced in ink. This is... He hesitated, voice low, nearly swallowed. This is fraud. Bryn's voice sliced and sharp behind me, brittle and rising. You're seriously doing this, here in front of everyone? I didn't turn. When were you going to tell us? After you sold the house, after the money cleared? Her voice flared. You always make yourself the victim. I was never the victim, I replied, steady and cold. I was just tired of being the ghost in the house I held together. A ripple moved through the crowd. Audible gasps, fragmented whispers. The yard wasn't pretending anymore. They were listening, connecting the dots, the receipts, the renovations, the vanishing money. Mom stepped in, voice shaking. Please, let's not do this here. I looked at her, soft but firm. Then, because if not here, it'll be buried, like everything else. That was when Bryn broke. Not in guilt, in panic. Her tears came fast, loud, theatrical. Her voice shrill as she pointed at me, called me bitter, manipulative. Said I was tearing the family apart. But the more she yelled, the quieter I became. And in that quiet, the truth rang louder. Across the yard, I saw Delphine. Arms folded, eyes calm, unreadable. Her silence didn't signal fear. It was recognition. She had known. And now, so did everyone else. I moved toward the dessert table where the peach cobbler sat untouched beneath a veil of awkward tension. I placed a sealed manila envelope right in the center, sharp and deliberate. This is just the beginning, I said, not loudly but clearly, each syllable cutting through the night. By tomorrow, everyone will know who really owns this house. I turned to Bryn one last time. Her face was twisted in disbelief, as if she still thought the house, the room, the audience belonged to her, as if delusion could still pass as truth. I stepped back, my fingertips grazing the envelope like it was a match resting on dry kindling. The yard went still. The air thickened not with heat but consequence. Even the cicadas, loud and relentless all evening, had fallen silent. Like they too understood something had shifted. Then a voice, casual, smug. "So you're the mooch, huh?" A man I didn't recognize, hair too gelled, collar too tight. One of Bryn's work friends, no doubt still playing hero in a sinking script. I turned slowly. "No," I said flatly. "I'm the reason there's still a roof over this barbecue." Somewhere behind him, someone coughed. A woman adjusted her glass. Another fumbled with her phone, suddenly fascinated by nothing. No one laughed. No one stepped in. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was acknowledgement. People were starting to see the scaffolding behind the illusion. And it was collapsing. Bryn clapped her hands too loud. "All right, everyone, let's take our seats, shall we?" she called out, voice wobbling through forced cheer. They moved slow, awkward, like people navigating wreckage while pretending it was still a garden party. But I noticed how their eyes never fully left me. Not in anger, in revelation. I walked toward the long table. Every place was perfectly set. Napkins folded, wine poured. Name cards in Bryn's looping cursive. I scanned them. Mine wasn't there. There was no place card, no chair. Just a mismatched folding seat half sunk near the trash bins at the far end of the table. A silent message disguised as oversight. An afterthought someone regretted just enough not to fix. I stood still. Bryn's eyes flicked toward me, then away, sharp, cold, calculated. She didn't need to say a word. She'd planned this. She wanted me invisible. But then Delphine moved. Without ceremony, she passed the drink table, walked to the center of the setup, and lifted one of the real chairs, not a spare, not a fold-up, but a proper seat with arms and a cushion. She carried it slowly, deliberately, and set it down right beside me. Right in the heart of it all. No speech, no spotlight, just a nod, a silent, revolutionary act. That nod said, "You've been seen, and not just by ghosts." I sat down. That's when Bryn cracked. "This was supposed to be a peaceful dinner," she snapped. Her voice pitched. Her arms flailed slightly, as if she could still sweep the tension back under the rug. "A calm, civil evening, and you've turned it into a circus, Lucille." I didn't flinch. Didn't raise my voice. I kept my gaze locked on hers. "No," I said, calm and clear. "It was supposed to be another staged performance. You just didn't expect anyone to pull back the curtain." Her cheeks flushed. Her jaw tightened. "You think you're the victim. You twist everything. You make it about you. You're manipulative, bitter, exhausting." I glanced around. Guests had stopped eating. Some had never started. Forks hovered mid-air. All eyes were no longer on me. They were on her. "You want to talk about exhausting?" I said quietly. I paid the back taxes. I filed the permits. I reinforced the foundation when no one else wanted to deal with it. I kept this house upright while you planned brunches and posted filtered grief. Bryn stepped toward me, reckless. "You're just a squatter with a grudge." I laughed soft, not from joy, but from the relief that comes when truth finally stretches its limbs. "I'm the legal property owner." I didn't need to shout it. I simply nodded toward the buffet. "The documents are in that envelope. The deed, the will, the truth, all there." Gasps moved like wind. Someone knocked over a wine glass, caught it just in time. The yard was no longer hers. Mom stood. Her voice trembled. Enough! Both of you. Please. I just wanted one night of peace. I looked at her then, really looked. Her hair had thinned. Her hands clutched the napkin too tightly. But I also remembered her lullabies, the way she used to hum while brushing my hair. The night she let me stay home because my heart was breaking, not my bones. I did too, I said gently. But peace doesn't come from pretending, and it doesn't come from protecting the one who causes the war. She sat down, slowly, quietly, her eyes glassy, her mouth a tight line. Bryn's mascara had begun to run. Her voice, when it came, cracked in the middle. You want to make this legal? Fine. Let's do it. You'll regret this. I stood, not in anger, not in defiance, but to end the masquerade. You've mistaken my silence for surrender, I said. That ends now. Then I turned, to the table, to the guests, to the envelope waiting in plain sight. Tomorrow your signature won't matter, I said, facing Bryn one last time. Mine already does. And I sat, this time at the table, in the seat that should have always been mine. I didn't need to say it again. I stood once more and walked into the center of the yard. The envelope in hand felt less like a weapon and more like a reckoning. I wasn't Lucille, the sensitive one, not the difficult sister, or the shadow in their family portraits. I was the one holding the truth, and they all knew it. My heels crunched softly on the gravel. I moved like I had all the time in the world, and for the first time in years, I did. I placed the envelope at the drink table center stage. Let it sit there. Let it breathe. Let them watch it. Let Bryn's smile falter, then collapse. And then I opened it. Page by page. Notarized deed transfer. Dated witnessed official. Tax receipts with my name in bold. Property insurance statements. Mortgage payoff letters. A decade of silent ownership made visible, undeniable. No drama, no declaration, just paper and proof. I wasn't there to cause a scene. I was there to end one. I said nothing until the final page was laid flat on the table. Each document, an indictment, every line of ink, a reckoning. Then I looked up. My voice was steady, calm. This home, I said, legally belongs to me. It has, for over 2 years. The silence that followed rolled through the yard like a winter wind, sharp sobering. Heads turned, faces tightened. Some guests instinctively glanced at Bryn, waiting for her to laugh, to spin the moment into one of her clever performances, a prank, a misunderstanding, some elaborate family joke. But Bryn didn't speak. Her mouth was slightly ajar, her expression hollow, like she'd just watched her own reflection splinter and didn't recognize what was staring back. I turned to her slow, deliberate. You called me a guest in my own home, I said. Turns out, you've been the squatter. Someone choked on their wine. A fork dropped to the concrete. The stillness that followed wasn't passive. It was surgical. It dissected every word, every lie, every denial that had been carefully built to bury the truth. I didn't wait for her to stammer a rebuttal. I moved toward the porch, one step at a time, each footfall echoing like a gavel. From my purse, I pulled a small brass plaque, the one I had custom made weeks ago, just in case. It wasn't showy. It didn't gloat. It told the truth. From beneath the flower planter, I retrieved the cordless drill I'd hidden earlier, my hand gripping it like a tool of finality. The sharp whir of metal cutting into wood was the only sound in the yard. Then I mounted the plaque onto the entry post. L. Dorn, legal owner since 2021. Behind me, the whispers grew, some disbelieving, some beginning to understand, like water finally finding cracks in the dam. In the garden, Delphine stood still, arms crossed, gaze fixed. No smile, no applause, just a slow, solemn nod. Her approval didn't need volume. It had always been quiet like mine. Then Bryn's voice tore through the hush, cracked and venomous. "You're insane! You ambushed your own family in front of strangers. How could you? I didn't turn. I protected what I built when no one else would." "You're vindictive," she spat. "You're tearing this family apart." "No." The word came from behind her, low but resolute. It was Leo. He stepped forward, eyes pale, but focused, his voice calm, like someone who had just surfaced for the first time in years. "You did that when you took out a second mortgage on a house that wasn't yours." Gasps sharper now. One of the older cousins recoiled, like he'd just stepped into a truth he didn't want to wear. Bryn's face lost what little color it had left. Her eyes searched the yard, desperate, unmoored, begging for rescue. No one moved. Even Mom sat down slowly in one of the white plastic chairs, staring at the grass, as if it might open up and swallow her from the weight of what had been unearthed. "I'm sorry this had to happen here," I said, turning slightly to face them all. "But the truth doesn't wait for a convenient time. Sometimes it just walks through the front door and doesn't ask permission." I turned back to Bryn. "You have 24 hours to vacate the property," I said. "I won't involve the police yet." Her lip quivered. "You wouldn't—" "I would," I said. "And I will." Then I turned toward the house. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. The quiet click behind me rang louder than anything she could have screamed. It echoed down the walkway, off the porch steps, all the way to the lawn where the lies had been aired like dirty laundry. Inside, the house felt different. Not cold, not familiar, just mine. The silence wrapped around me, not as a punishment this time, but as something earned. I moved to the front window. People were leaving now. Some briskly, others in a daze. Processing, recalculating. A few glanced back at the house. At me. Then it came, the scream. Sharp, raw, piercing. Bryn. But I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I let it tear through the night and die in the quiet she once forced me to survive in. Outside, the brass plaque glinted in the porch light, not as memory, not as triumph, but as fact. They built their lies on my silence. I just reclaimed every brick. The sun crept in the next morning, slow and honest. Its rays stretched through the living room window, spilling across worn floors and chipped baseboards. The plaque outside caught the light, casting a golden reflection across the threshold. L. Dorn, legal owner since 2021. No voices, no laughter, no glasses raised in false celebration. Just the house. Finally still. Bryn had left sometime after midnight. No note, no words. Just the slam of a car door. Red taillights disappearing into the dark. And the house, finally, exhaled. I stood at the top of the stairs, one hand resting lightly on the banister, and watched her go. Bryn didn't look back. I didn't stop her. There were no words exchanged, no apology offered, and I hadn't expected one. Apologies aren't currency to people who think silence equals submission. Around 6 a.m., Leo texted, "I should have seen it. I'm sorry. I believed he meant it. But meaning and repair are two different things. Some wounds bleed behind closed doors and never ask for an audience." Mom didn't call. I didn't expect that either. Her discomfort had always been something she preferred to fold and tuck beneath a rug, not confront in the open air. Grief for her was best served with small talk and distraction, not confrontation. I stepped outside into the aftermath. Paper plates half filled with food, no one finished, still clung to the tables. Confetti from a fallen centerpiece drifted across the grass like dead leaves. A wine bottle lay sideways in the lawn cork, half out, as if the party itself had tried to sneak away before it had to admit what happened. Delphine arrived just after 9. As always, as ever. She didn't knock. She didn't ask. She just picked up a trash bag and began to work wiping tables, gathering the remains, moving quietly through the ruins. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. That silence felt like grace. Around noon, a neighbor approached the fence with a bouquet of supermarket flowers in hand. She offered them like a peace treaty. "Didn't mean to stare last night," she said, voice soft. "But that took guts." I nodded, took the flowers, and murmured a thank you. She didn't stay long. No one did. Once the yard was cleared, I went back inside. The house had quieted into itself, not hollow, but reflective. I walked it slowly, letting memories surface in the silence. In the kitchen, I traced my fingers along the faint pencil marks on the doorframe still visible, measuring my height at 9. The wood had chipped, but the memory remained. I sat on the stairs not because I was tired, but because it was the same spot I once sat at 12, listening through the thin wall as my parents debated sending me away. Boarding school, reputation, optics. I wasn't meant to hear, but I heard everything. That day they chose image over intimacy. Today, I chose truth. From a drawer, I pulled out an old photo me and Dad on the porch, laughing, ice cream dripping down our wrists. It wasn't framed, it wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I placed it on the mantel above the fireplace, where everyone had to see it. No caption, no filter, just history unedited. Later that afternoon, I changed the locks. It wasn't dramatic, just overdue. Then I sent the message. Mail forwarding is active for 30 days. I will not engage beyond that. It was clear, not cruel. Firm, not vengeful. I didn't need to cut ties with fury-only finality. Closure is a myth. But boundaries are real, and they make peace where people can't. As the sun began its descent, Delphine passed me in the hallway, a cardboard box balanced on her hip. She paused, met my eyes. "You didn't win," she said quietly. I held her gaze. "No," I replied. I reclaimed. A small smile curved at the edge of her mouth. "You always had it in you." "I don't want a throne," I told her. "Just peace." That night, I brewed tea and stood at the kitchen window. The yard was clean. The porch light hummed softly in the dusk. Across the grass, the old swing, the one Dad hung for us, swayed gently in the breeze, like it remembered a time when we believed this place would always be safe. Maybe one day I'll pass this house on to someone who knows how to keep it, not just keep others out. Sometimes standing your ground doesn't look like raising your voice. Sometimes it's refusing to step aside when the world has already moved on without you. I didn't reclaim this house out of revenge. I reclaimed it for every time I was told to be quiet, to let it go, to not make a scene. If this story found you in the silent part of your chest, where your own truth lives, then ask yourself, have you ever been pushed out of something that was rightfully yours? Your voice, your worth, your space. Tell me how you handled it. Share your story in the comments. If this hit something real type 1, Or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't resonate, tell me why. Your voice matters here too. This channel is built on stories that speak the truth, that dig beneath the surface and say what others are too afraid to. If you believe in those kinds of stories, subscribe, because there are more coming, and some truths are just getting started.